Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be back with another episode of Coffee with Carlehr. We're back with our artist series, and today we have a musician, a scholar, a professor, and importantly, my teacher, Dr. JoVia Armstrong. Hi, JoVia.
Hi, Carleah.
How are you? Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I feel pretty good. Yeah. You?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's a little chilly, but it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
So, Jovia, I want you to take me all the way back and tell me, how did you get your start in music?
Whoa, that was a really long time ago. My start was through my family. My dad was a singer in Detroit. Sang mostly at our church and other churches with his brothers. They were called the Armstrong brothers, and my dad loved music. My mom did too, and they both played music in the house like 24/7. My sister, though, my oldest sister, she had about 15 years on me. She's the one who got me into playing instruments. She was a big fan of Sheila E., and she brought me a drum set. I was pretty young. I didn't even know what it was really. I was maybe, I don't know, 8 years old. I didn't know how to use it. And it was a kind of a toy, so it didn't last very long. But she also really, 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 really loved music, and so the difference between my parents and my sister is that with my parents, they mostly play gospel music, Motown, and I would say, my dad was into jazz vocalists like Nat King Cole. At some point, he really got heavy into the blues, and we weren't allowed to listen to secular music while I was growing up. But my sister, who didn't live with us, she lived 8 houses down with my grandmother. She allowed me to go into her bedroom while she was at work, and I would just listen to everything. And she had, you know, all the R&B artists from the 80s, Luther Vandross, Anita Baker, um, so from both households, I got a broad range of Black music, but as a percussionist, my interests really were in global music. So my dad would take us to Blockbuster Music, and when they had a store, and you could go there, put on headphones, and listen to music. And I gravitated towards music from Cuba and Africa, Brazil, Latin jazz. And so between those three worlds, I got a really broad sense of what music was, and my own personal, like, favorites amongst those genres.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know it was your sister that got you into playing the drums. That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about being from Detroit. A lot of great black music comes from Detroit. How does being from there affect your music making?
Whoa. Well, yeah, well, the thing with Detroit is that music was definitely everywhere. Um, no differently than a place like Chicago. Um, but in Detroit, we had the great Cass Tech, which is the high school I went to. There was also a few other schools. There was Spain Middle School. There was Mumford, which I think the Winans family went to Mumford. Um, and so we would have just so many concerts, school concerts. Um, and so I can't really pinpoint exactly what the difference musically, like the difference between Detroit and other cities, because I was only in Detroit as a youth. But I can say that our music educators were amazing. They were amazing. They really pushed you. If you ever saw the movie Whiplash, um, we had a couple of teachers who were like that, where a stick may be thrown your way. Um, and they pushed us. They really pushed us. They didn't play around. We had a lot of Black women teaching music in, middle schools and high schools, in Detroit as well, and that was also very, I guess, inspirational for me to see them, and so I grew up never having this sense of, what girls can play and what they can't play and what they can do and what they can't do. The women in these high schools, they were very well respected, you know, by the men in the high school, so, yeah, but I can't really pinpoint the difference. I know my dad said in Detroit and he's not from Detroit, he moved there to join Motown, um, and he ended up I believe the story is that he ended up getting drafted to Vietnam before he could really, get his foot in the door, but he's from Alabama, and he knew the Temptations when they were all growing up there, and I think it was Otis from the Temptations that was telling my dad, "You should come to Detroit and sing." But from what I read and about Motown, it gravitated other artists, young artists to that space, and so I imagine, the Detroit music scene, because of Motown, offered a lot of opportunity, and so people, just saying they practiced, they sang and hoping to get a record deal. But yeah, that's it.
Wow, you never see that would have been great for the Motown class. You never said that Otis from the Temptations. Wow, that's
Yeah,
a great
yeah,
story.
I try to
So,
keep myself out of the classroom.
oh, so you've had a lot of different pathways that you've taken in music. You've been a manager, you're a percussionist, you're a composer, you've done some community work with music. So tell me, what would you say was the most difficult role in music?
Mm. Well, I would say they were all difficult because, um, I think people like me who do all those things, we're doing it to supplement our income. And so it's kind of like, if I could just be a musician and make all of my money being a musician, that's what I would have done. But that career is tough. Number 1, when you're a percussionist. Um, 2, being a woman in the industry, um, that's tough as well because a lot of the guys wanna hire their friends, um, and they might like you, um, in one sense, like, they might like your playing, but they want to drink and hang and talk guy stuff at the gig. But then there's the tour management thing. There wasn't enough work doing that, to sustain me, so a lot of these roles, you'll see a lot of people who do these positions, who work these positions, wear multiple hats. When people are not tour managing, they're doing something else, to supplement the income. Uh, Percussion is tough. It's the skill set that I, feel closest to. I mean, that's what I was trained to do was be a percussionist and just lifting the equipment, carrying that stuff. You get to the venue and then you realize there's a flight of stairs that you've got to climb up with all these drums and cymbals and hardware. Going through TSA is really hard. A lot of times they may lose your things, they may break your things, and so going through TSA is not always easy. You have to pack a certain way because even if you're 1 pound over with your luggage, it's like, "Okay, I gotta take a cowbell out." So now you take out my cowbell, which actually is 5 pounds. Now I gotta put that in my book bag and walk around in the airport with that, along with this cymbal case, and so, a lot of musicians end up, just being very healthy, trying to be very healthy because of these situations, but yeah, it's right now I'm trying to get massages every week, 'cause it's tough on that end. You're learning everyone's music. You're not just keeping up with your own music and compositions, but you're learning everyone's music. You're probably playing with 3 to 4 artists over a weekend, and so you have to separate. You also have to separate what you've memorized for the week, um, and show up to the gig and play it perfectly. You know, people expect for you to respect their work, and so you wanna there's a pressure there. There's a lot of stress in, um, playing someone's song and doing a good job for them. Uh, and I remember, you know, the few times that I, had rehearsals, you know, when I started composing music, and I had those same expectations. I wasn't looking for perfection, but I just wanted people to put their ear to the music and at least go over it a couple of times before you get to rehearsal. And when they get to rehearsal and not know it, you are now in a situation. It's like, we sound bad, but we have a show this weekend. What are we gonna do? It becomes stressful because now your name is on the marquee. You know, your name is what's been advertised. So, I think performing is, to me, harder than the tour management. Even though that, you know, getting your logistics wrong, of course, that can be a disaster, but that rarely happens. And if you're a good musician, it rarely happens that you are messing up someone's gig. But those are some things that are, I would say, are very hard. I mean, even with education, I go to rehearsal, then I have to go teach, and after teaching, I might have a recording session. I have to listen to students' work, I have to grade their work, I have it's just a lot.
No, but I think that's a lot of great advice that you gave, because I think sometimes younger artists, or even myself, when you're younger, you think, I'm going to go make it in music, but no one really talks about what it actually takes to make it. Like, you might be the tour manager, you know, you might be the side person, and then you might be the lead person. So it's being able to kind of fulfill all of these roles to what people think is making it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. It's really a juggle, and then you wanna it's a juggling act, I should say, and then you wanna treat people fairly too. So if the promoter I haven't had to deal with this, in a very, very long time, you know, like in my 20s, but, you know, if a promoter you hear these stories about promoters not paying, and then you look at your musicians and they're looking at you and it's like, I'm so sorry, he didn't pay me." And so what I've always tried to do is I would save up money even though the gig was paying. You never know what'd happen, so I would save up money to make sure that I could pay the band. Um, I'm noticing here in the South, it's really hard. Like, in the South, things are done differently. Um, someone a friend of mine just was told that she would have to play like, pretty much audition to play at this place that has a festival for jazz, and her name is everywhere, and this person said, "Well, you don't have an audience here, so, you're gonna have to play to a track or something. I need to hear you play and see how the audience likes you." So, um, that wouldn't happen in other places. In other places, they can read your reviews in newspapers and magazines and look at your awards and say, "Oh, you you must be really good. You're gonna draw a name, draw an audience." But, so right now, I've been here for a little over a year, and I haven't been playing in the South. I also cannot a lot of people have invited me to play in places here, you know, when I say I haven't been playing, and they say, "Oh, well, we've got this place over here. You can play over there, you can play over there." And it's like, "Yeah, I can't play for $50 though," you know? Um, and when you factor in the fact like, factor in these things I was talking about where you have to lift all these drums, get them to the venue, make do all the maintenance on your equipment, and, like, after you do all that stuff, the $50 is not gonna, afford you that massage that you need afterwards.
It's very true. I was I was doing a gig once and someone said, "How big is the group?" I said, "Oh, it's going to be a trio." And they said, "Oh, we can offer $75 for that." And
Mm.
I said, "Oh, a piece?" They said, "No, for the whole group." I said,
Mm.
so a lot of that happens here, and I think people don't realize, like, just because I'm spending an hour of my time performing, that means I had to gather the music together. I had to rehearse the musicians, and not to the years of lessons that I've took to be
Yeah.
able to like stand up on stage and do this. So people really don't understand. It's not just the performance that you're paying for.
No, no, and I think, maybe it's music appreciation, maybe it's a lack of knowing these things, knowing what and I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. I'm talking kind of quickly to you because of this platform, but I could go in way deep about the things that musicians do in order to have these types of careers that we have. I mean, the tours I've been on, some have been smooth and some have been like, "Please, I just wanna get home." Um, I a few weekends ago hadn't slept in a bed in 48 hours. I left my hotel at 3:30 in the morning to catch a flight. The airport was an hour away, and, catch the flight at 6 it was 6:15 flight. I got to the next city, the hotel room was not ready, so then I had to find some place to go for 4 hours. Actually, it was more like 5 or 6 hours, and by the time the hotel room was ready, I had to go straight to the venue, and so I'm sitting at the venue thinking, "Well, I could just go to the hotel right now," but I was exhausted. In my 2 suitcases, the airlines broke both of the wheels off of both of them. So I had 3 wheels on each suitcase, a book bag, and my cymbal case. So I'm dragging 2 suitcases, do the show in that second city, and after I did the show, it didn't make any sense to go to the hotel then because I had a flight at midnight. So I went straight from the show to LAX, took an overnight flight to Pittsburgh, and had a show that day. So I didn't see a and then after the Pittsburgh gig, drove to Charlottesville, which was, what is that, 4 or 5? I forget how many hours that is from Pittsburgh and Charlottesville. Um, but the thing is that, I didn't get to bed again till 3 o'clock in the morning, so that was 48 hours that went by. So when you're doing those types of things, you have to keep up with all your gear, with your necklaces and rings and jewelry, shoes, you leave stuff, you leave music, in order to not be forgetful or to not fall down the stairs from exhaustion, you have to be alert, alert, alert all the time, and that's exhausting, on top of the fact that you haven't slept in a bed in 48 hours, so but like I said, I can go into a lot of stories, about it, and then I also wonder, why do we do this? Why do we put ourselves through all of this? And honestly, I do believe that music heals, and that's why I do it. I love to, there's sometimes you do shows and audience people in the audience may cry or tell you that they needed to hear the music that night, and so that's why I keep destroying my body.
Oh, that's true. Music does heal. So your music goes into a lot of different genres. So you incorporate technology, you incorporate meditative style. So tell me, how did your music start to transform into that, or has that always been there?
I realized a couple of years ago that it's always been there. Um, my first album was in 2009. I released it for fun. I didn't even take it serious myself, but, um, it was technology was a big part of it. When you don't have a whole lot of money to pay people to perform on your record, technology has to be a big part of it unless you're doing solo work and unless you know how to play multiple instruments, which I didn't. And so the first album incorporated live musicians and technology. So on that album, you'll find beats. I use a lot of MIDI, I use a lot of samples. And I kind of use those things to build a foundation for the music. And then I would call in musicians to play where I saw fit. A lot of the music, the lyrics were positive. I tried to stay away from negative lyrics. Um, the first song is called Think Twice, which was, um, the theme of it was just to um, encourage people to not, like to just go for their dreams. The second song on that record was about the Gullah Geechee people, in the Sapelo Islands, and excuse me, and the third song was about I called it Head Game, so it was about how the media um, lies to us. And so those are the types of themes that I was writing about, um, perseverance um, and just being what I would call the last song was called Bizarre. So it was about embracing yourself, that I'm bizarre, I'm a weirdo, and but it's okay, to just be yourself. And so that's where it started. And so my music continues with these types of thoughts, even though the last two records didn't have lyrics, except for one song called Zebra, which is about balance. So the last two albums are coming out of my dissertation work, which is Black meditative music, um, and I call it Black space. And I wasn't creating a genre as much as I was acknowledging that it existed already. And now of course, we have Andre 3000, who's um, you would think um, that he came out with this record, which I heard is on the Billboards #1 right now for new age music. Um, you want to believe that okay, his music is gonna open doors for other Black artists who do meditative music, but if you go to Spotify or Tidal and look his album up, related artists are gonna be rappers. P. Diddy popped up several times. So, um, but yeah, the black men I did this dissertation talking about what makes Black meditative music what it is, and so my music is like an accompaniment for the dissertation writing. And a lot of it was based on the works of Bell Hooks. Um, so I write about her in the first chapter of the dissertation, and, in one of her books, I believe Black Looks, in the beginning, she talks about, um, Black people, um, after slavery and how we were, assimilating, and trying to prove ourselves to whiteness and to white people, and at the end of the book, she talked about how we needed to self-actualize, how we needed to meditate and contemplate who we were, and so the music was to help people contemplate and meditate, and I did it in a way where it's not the type of meditative music that you would hear in a yoga studio, or, when you go to get a massage or something like that. Um, that music is very common, like, what we hear is just a drone, and it's very soft, and a lot of times it relaxes you to a point of putting you to sleep, and I didn't wanna do that, and so I do talk about, Black church music in the dissertation as well, as far as how we still are contemplating while we're at church, even though it's loud. Um, you're not gonna see people sleeping during the ceremony at a Black church. um, but we are still engaging in um, activities of spirituality, music, and deliverance. And so that's what the music, and I did it in this form of jazz. My record is in the form of, I guess you would say jazz because it's a lot of improvisation, but you also have improvisation in black church as well.
It's very true. Very true. So, take me, you've had a lot of performance experiences. So, what
Mhm.
would you say was your favorite performance experience?
Um, wow, that is tough. That's a tough one because I've done hundreds of shows here in the US and overseas. I don't know if there's one that is my favorite performance experience. I think that each one um, there are aspects of those shows that I really loved. I could say that playing with El DeBarge was one of my favorite experiences because of his professionalism. I loved, watching him direct the band. Um, the band at the time, like, the rhythm section was tight, but the horns were it's like they were all over the place, and so we had our sound check. El DeBarge walks in, and the horns are in the wrong key, and so he looks at them and he says, "Hey, horns, horns, let's take it here and, play this." So he had, like, a Yamaha motif on stage. So he would play the line and say, "No, no, it's right here, it's right here." He played again, and he said, "Okay, can y'all work that out?" And he said, "Okay, cool, work that out. I'm gonna go and get some hot water." So he would walk off the stage, talk to his management team, drink some hot water, come back on stage. "Alright, horns, y'all got it? Y'all ready? Alright, let's do it. Let's run it." So it's like you're talking like, this is about 4 hours before showtime, and I would have been so upset, even though I don't usually I don't show my anger in those situations either, but for someone like him, I expected it. I'm expecting for this artist to just go off, and he didn't. And he did that for each song. He had to show them each part, and I loved, um, how cool, calm, and collective he was. He didn't go off on anyone. He just was very patient and very positive, and he said, "Y'all to get it. Let's just run it again." And, so I love that he kept his cool. There are other shows where I love the intimacy of the show where, some stages, like, if you think about the House of Blues, the stage is elevated and the audience feels like they're 50 feet away. There are some venues where the stage is pretty low and the audience is right there, and there's just this presence on stage where you feel like you're one with the audience. I've always loved those types of shows. There are some trips where we actually had downtime, like Brazil. I went to Sao Paulo, and, um, we were able the food was so amazing, and we went dancing, we went and just hung out with the locals, and that's probably my biggest part of being a musician is meeting people, especially those with, different backgrounds, different cultures than me. But Spain was maybe my top, cultural experience, South Africa and Spain. One thing about Spain is they don't really sleep, and so, we did the show in Spain, and then, if you can't sleep, you can go for a walk, and so I went for a walk, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you see, these elderly couples walking together, holding hands, um, yeah, so I would say more so than the shows, it's the experience of traveling and meeting people that I really love. Um, but I can't, like, pinpointing one show that's my favorite. I if it happened, I've forgotten it, so it wasn't that special.
Well, that's what happens when you're just all over the place. You got all the gigs and the shows. Yeah, but that's a great El DeBarge story because a lot of first because he was calm, cool, and collected, but also a lot of singers don't have that ability to sit down to even know what the horns are supposed to be playing.
I've been in that situation too. Yeah, one thing promoters did very badly is, the artist you're playing with would send the promoter the music. The promoter is thinking in their mind, "Oh, you just want me to give the musicians the album." So they give us the album. A few weeks later, the artist shows up, we're at rehearsal, and the artist is looking at us like we're crazy, and they're like, "What did you listen to? Like, this is not what I sent." And of course, they sent a performance, CD where the chord changes are different, the grooves might be different, just different arrangements. And that happened a few times, and one time, um, it happened, I remember it was with, a artist, I believe she's out of Ohio, Kanya Doss, and, you know, she was cool too, but she's just like, "Man, this is terrible," like, "What am I gonna do?" Luckily, she toured with her background vocalist, and one of the background vocalists could play piano, and so she was able to sit at the piano and show us what to play. And that was a learning lesson for me, because at the time um I'm still not a good pianist, but, I also I didn't think that I was a good composer or arranger at the time, and so for me, it was a good lesson in when you travel with your musical director or travel with someone who does know the music, who can teach it to the band because the promoters, a lot of times they don't they're just excited that they're putting on the show and they get to meet this artist that they're bringing into town and, they get to pop their collar a little bit. So, um, that was like I said, it was just a really life lesson for me in that moment. I've seen that multiple times. It was quite a few artists I've worked with where the promoters didn't do their job.
Well, that's terrible. Tell me
Mhm.
about tell me about your group endeavor. I might say it wrong, but I'm gonna cut it out. Eunoia. Tell me
Yeah,
about
yeah.
how did it start?
It was almost a mistake. Um, I was in grad school, someone in Chicago hit me up and said, "Hey, we're doing a women in jazz series, we want you to play." I said, "Cool." And I remember receiving a contract from them, but I didn't turn it in because the woman who contacted me resigned. And so, I didn't know who to contact at that point, and I just kinda left it alone. I was just thinking, "Oh, well, there goes the gig." And, October comes around, and I get an email from them saying, "Hey, so what do you need for next week?" And I said, "What?" So, I called, a few musician friends of mine, and I had no music. I was not prepared. And so I was in I think I was in Chicago at the time, and I was flying back to, California for school, then I had to fly back. I think I had 10 days to prepare for this show. And I pretty much sit at my brother's, he had a piano in his family room, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote. I mean, I just sketched out melodies and chord progressions and I just and it was also, um, I don't know, I was just kind of flowing. I got into this creative flow, which was great, being that the gig was in 10 days. And I said, "Well, I got some sketches of things. We should be able to work this out." Called up Leslie DeShazor, who plays electric violin in Detroit, and Eldon Kelly, who played guitar, also in Michigan. And I used a bass player in Chicago, and so we did the show. I told them to use their pedals, their guitar pedals, and I was already in this vibe of like I didn't exactly know what my dissertation research was going to be about, but I was already kind of thinking about this, about having this atmospheric type of sound. And so that's pretty much what happened. We played in a venue and people walked up to me after the show saying the music was so celestial. And I said, wow, celestial. Like, what is that about? Like, maybe it's just all these atmospheric sounds we have going on. And, I, that was October of 2019. A little while later, I was asked to write the music for the Black Index art exhibit by a professor. And so I wrote a bunch of music for that and called those same people. But it was during the pandemic. It was much harder to accomplish. The guitarist ended up quitting the project because it was so hard. We were like sending tracks back and forth. It was exhausting. And he had too much going on. And so he quit the project. And at that point, I was getting frustrated. So um, I was able to fly Leslie, Isaiah Sharkey out to Los Angeles and call Jeff Parker. And I gave them a month. I said, listen, it's too hard to email tracks back and forth for these recordings. Are you all just willing to show up and do a recording session? We'll knock it out in a day. And everybody said, yeah. So they flew out and we got it done. And so it was around that time I had come up with the name Eunoia Society. Eunoia means beautiful thinking. In rhetoric, it is the goodwill that a speaker cultivates between themselves and their audience. And that was one thing I did at that show was at the top of the show, I gave the audience permission to be themselves. I told them that they can clap, they can dance if they wanted to, they can respond to me. Because one thing I don't like is a boring audience. I'm working my butt off. And a lot of times, I notice in certain venues, especially more white establishments, people are actually told not to talk, not to enjoy themselves really. Um, and so that happened when I was in my 20s. I went to see, I want to say Terrence Blanchard, and the guy who owned the venue came out and said, when he mentioned Terrence Blanchard's name, me and my two friends were like, yeah, yeah. And he said, we don't do that hooting and hollering in here. And yeah, we were kind of offended. But what was cool is Terrence Blanchard walked on stage and said, I would love for y'all to hoot and holler, like bring it on. But yeah, when we go um, to see a symphony orchestra, there's a certain etiquette you have where you don't make noise. But for jazz, I'm like, I can't have that. Like, please, say something. And because of that invitation to be themselves, it was just a fantastic, beautiful show. It was just amazing. It was awesome.
Wow, that's great how the group all came together. So you told me about Eunoia Society. You just released Inception back in the
Mhm.
summer. So what is next for Dr. JoVia Armstrong?
What's next? Okay, there's a lot of next. Um, one is that in late December, early January, Leslie and I are gonna start working on the third album. So that's the immediate thing. I'm working on a duet piece for two faculty members. Um, I am working on a collaboration with, Iodeli, uh, African Drum and Dance Group, which is in Chicago. Being a percussionist, I am very curious to hear how my music would sound with, a African drumming ensemble. And so I reached out to Io, and she was down for it, and so now I've been thinking about that. I probably won't start writing for that until February, and then I would, of course, have to find funds to launch that project. I'm also working on a Donald Byrd mixtape. I love Donald Byrd. I actually he went to Cass Tech as well, but he's one of my favorite artists, and so, um, then so the Donald Byrd mixtape, I'm hoping to be done with that maybe next summer. And, what else? And I'm working on this project just for fun. I'm making music for like film score music. Um, I don't have a film to work on right now. But I wanted to just keep those chops up, so I'm working on that, and we'll, um, release that maybe next year. And I also have an electronic music album that I started in grad school that I didn't finish, so I'll probably finish that next year as well. So, yeah, just lots of music, some collaborations, and I'm also getting, like, back into my research. So I took a little break. I needed some time to get to know Charlottesville and UVA, and, so now I'm getting back into the research.
Wow. That's impressive. You are busy. We love a professor who is also actively pursuing their music. That is.
Yeah, I love my students too. I love working, with the undergrads and my grad students. I try my best to, give them the time that they need from me, because I didn't get it when I was in undergrad. So it's really important for me to give back, and so it's a blessing for me to be here, as a professor.
Oh. Okay, so you've given us a lot of great insight to the ins and outs of being a musician. What does it mean to make it as a musician? So, if you had one piece of advice you could give to someone who's coming up in the music business, what would it be?
Ooh. To be yourself, um, do the music that you wanna produce, to make just if you make money your goal, you're gonna sound like everyone else. And that's okay. If that is your goal, that you wanna just make money doing music, you can totally do that. It's actually pretty easy, especially if you're not a touring musician like I was for a long time. If you're focused on composition, um, you can definitely make money doing that too, producing music. But if money is the goal, you're gonna end up sounding like everyone else. If you want to be an artist and have your own thing going, it's best to find ways to slip your own character and personality into your work. And I say that because that's also something I do with Eunoia Society. When we have recording sessions, I give a little pep talk, and my pep talk is, "There's no such things as mistakes. There's no such thing as perfection." I want everyone in the room to go back to the moment of time when you very first picked up your instrument, when you were excited to play your instrument, when we were kids. Because once you become a professional, it's not as fun, it's a lot more work involved, but if we can get back to that space where we're just happy to pick up instrument, no matter how bad we sounded, it didn't really matter in that moment. And so, when I tell them these things, it makes them more relaxed. It makes them if I drop my stick during the session and that's picked up in the recording, I don't necessarily I don't say, "Let's do another take." I leave it in the recording, and my mixing engineer may take it out, but I don't tell them to. There's a few times in our sessions where I can hear Leslie hit the microphone with her bow. I don't take that out either. Um, there was a spider crawling on Damon's bass during his solo, and you can almost hear him blowing the spider off his bass. Those to me are that's what makes stories, for those recording sessions. Those are the things that we can document, when we have our Eunoia Society, memoir, So, again, just not thinking about mistakes or being perfectionist, just going back to just going into who you are, just being yourself. So that's my advice.
That's great advice. So, last question.
Okay.
If I could play any song to introduce listeners to JoVia Armstrong, what song of yours should it be?
Oh. It's hard because, like you said, I do a lot of different genres. For the hip hop community, I would say listen to Zebra. Um, for anyone who's into, uh, mindfulness, the last 2 albums, maybe I feel like Embryo would be a good one, um, or even Creation. For the jazz heads, Beautifully Black, and that's my favorite.
Wow, we're gonna play one of those. I guess we'll see which one it is.
Okay.
So, lastly, tell people where can they check you out, where can they keep up with you?
Oh, well, I have a website. You can go to joviaarmstrong.com, um, to, you know, stalk me. There's also the music is on Bandcamp, so if you type in joviaarmstrong.bandcamp.com, you should be able to find me there. That's where the music is at. And also there's a Eunoia Society, website, Eunoia, EUNOIA, society.com. I encourage you to, through Bandcamp or even, um, our website, you can sign up to be on a mailing list. But I'm usually on Instagram. So you can find me there, Dr. Dot so Dr. Dot Jovia Armstrong is there. That's my social media platform of choice.
Wow, you love the gram. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Dr. Armstrong, for being here this morning. I had a great time.
Thanks, Carlia. I appreciate your time.
Bye.
Bye bye.